Benjamin Franklin once said that time is gold, which is just a simple reminder that life is too precious to be taken for granted. To Strat, I'm going to give a clearer comparative on golf versus op, and second, I'm going to elevate why Joseph's contribution of realization on why time is important to be placed in pedestal in our side wins us the debate. What happens in golf's world is something that's structurally larger than what I have pointed out in my intro. The decommodification in itself is a mechanism that allows further abuses of people within the same classes to be pitted on a quote-unquote survival of the fittest baseline. Because Joseph already pointed out that commodifying time creates a shared baseline that everyone's hours can be counted, demanded, and compensated. So this reasoning applies to those who are on the same class. When you work the same hour, same output, and same skill set, you have this fucking metric, the universal baseline to which structures can actually recognize people's value on a more equal starting point without forcing them to prove rare uniqueness in order to matter and survive. What we are saying is that once time is treated as valuable, society can respect people on the basis that their life and labor already cost something rather than judging them only by extraordinary output or exceptional talent. That is far better because it lessens the pressure to compete in a far more brutal against each other society predatory network. See the extent of the material in OO versus EO. They pointed out that formalized structure is needed. We pointed out that even other formal structures are going to harm other people, especially if you're poor, with a less assumptive analytical comparative. More on this later. Next, Gobb's claim about unequal valuation of people's time is deeply uncomparative because they never prove a counterfactual where that inequality actually disappears. Share, this is a THR than a THO motion. You need to have a retrospective counterfactual. So in both worlds, people will still be valued differently on class and social status. The metric just changes inside government. And that is the call out that moves us in the meta within this debate. That's why we keep on asking for the alternative, which is far more important in a model debate. Because, Judge, if you think that inequality suddenly disappears in Gov side, I don't really think there's a substantive reasoning from both Gov teams on why it will suddenly happen. But then they claim that our rule makes people overly fixated on time. But we say that in the counterfactual, people will still be just as fixated on utility and visible contribution, but it's going to happen in a far more worse extent. Goff said that, fuck, this is bad because people will commodify their time. We say that commodification doesn't get taken out in both sides. I think the realistic framing for THR here is that the counterfactual still ends up being ruled by productivity valuation, and always right in calling this out. But where do we bring this call out in this debate? We say that this is just far more cruel because once time is not explicitly valued, the only thing left to justify your place in society is whether you can constantly prove usefulness through results, which are, by the way, harsher, especially for people on the ground. Why? Because there's an unequal birth lottery that exists, and you have less utility at birth to bring out better results in comparison to privileged individuals. This is the missing link that is exclusively filled out by CO. This is why, absent the control structure that commodified time creates, work was far less bounded and far less predictable. The reason why we even developed a structure arrangement like 9 to 5, because time became recognized as something valuable and therefore capable of being limited, sold, and protected. In earlier system, retroactively by the way, in a THR motion, when time was not clearly treated as commodity, labor was often far more open-ended, more arbitrary, more easily stretched out by landlords, families, or employers who could demand work without a clear stopping points. So it's even harder for you to climb out of the ladder because if you're born with less utility, it's harder for you to compete with results to others who have more privilege to produce better products or outcomes. So the point here is that commodifying time did not invent exploitation. It helped the language and structure that made exploitation easier to see and therefore easier to restrain. You still do not suddenly spend more time with your friends, family, or your social networks in your so-called free time in golf when the surrounding pressure is to constantly prove that you are useful enough to deserve security and opportunity or rest. Problem, the extent of this harm is harsher in their side. Why? Because they will be flowing in an arbitrary means. So the trade-off mentality exists in both sides. The difference is that in our side, people are at least have a clearer framework of boundaries because their time is recognized in macro by society as something that can be valued. Hence, it becomes a protected asset. Heck, this is the reason why we even have legal holidays and paid leaves, because society itself, through the mechanism of commodification, allows people to prosper and protect their right to have proper living standard through the means of their time. Next level, it is also through time that we evaluate skill in a far more greater extent, because consistency, discipline, and effort only becomes visible across sustained periods of work. So if you are on the same level, you have leverage if you are far more disciplined, for instance. That is good because it creates a fairer basis for recognition than merely rewarding those who can instantly display exceptional talent or inherited advantage. This is the larger meta that OO missed because I don't really know where they got their speech. And this also flips the desire of golf to have, more time to celebrate in their world because celebration is at least made legible in our side and defendable because again, it's a protected value in your side. It's a protected asset. State has to protect your time. Whereas in theirs, it's easier for leisure to be treated as optional, undeserved, or subordinate to whatever output society demands. Principle flip. Time in itself is the clearest representation of life. So once society places importance to time, it teaches people that their existence is not disposable and that other people do not get unlimited access to their hours, energy, and labor. That matters especially for the poor because, okay, I'll take the POI.
Right. So, do you think that all of the laborers in question benefit from this commodification of time, even if it comes at the cost of their health and the creative thinking that they cannot really unlock because like they are so fixated on productivity?
Bro, in your time, you won't have any creative thinking at all because you will be busy to exploit yourself to create those quote-unquote products or outputs. In our side, you have more time to at least improve yourself and then retire early on because you can value your time. You realize that time is something so valuable. That's why you fix your life early on to enjoy creative process, to enjoy all of the hobbies that you want to fix and have in the status quo. That's why in our side, that matters especially for the poor because they are the ones that's often forced to surrender their lives in small invisible pieces through unpaid work, for instance, waiting and endless obligation. So putting time on pedestal at large is good because it tells people that their life is important enough to be protected. And secondly, through exclusive flip, this also makes people realize how scarce their time actually is, so they are less likely to live under the illusion of stagnancy. This is why valuating time can drive social reform because once society accepts that time is limited, it becomes harder to tolerate systems that casually waste people's life. We demand better labor rights, faster public services, speedy justice, and fairer institutions precisely because people do not have infinite time to endure exploitation or delay through our means of work labors and through our means of commodification. Very proud to win this debate.